G'day, how's it going? Today I'm going to make some sauerkraut using a few vegetables I had left over in my fridge before going away on holiday. I've got about a quarter of a cabbage and half a dozen carrots. The quantity doesn't really matter at this stage, although we will weigh the total amount a bit later on so we can work out how much salt to add. The type of vegetables is also fairly flexible. They'll all ferment, but some are better than others. Cabbage is obviously the main vegetable used in sauerkraut, and is in fact the kraut in sauerkraut, which literally means sour cabbage. But carrot, fennel, beetroot, radish and plenty others are good as well. I guess as a rule of thumb what you're looking for are vegetables that have a robust texture and can be eaten raw. Anything too soft will likely be turned to mush. After trimming and discarding the bits you don't want to eat, slice the vegetables as thinly as possible, or grate them if that suits you better. They just need to be thin enough to massage and knead. Now's the time to weigh the vegetables. Ideally use scales that are accurate to 5 grams or less. I know this bowl weighs 1 kilo, so I didn't zero it before I added the vegetables. So here I have 900 grams. Once you have the total weight of all the vegetables, you need to multiply that amount by 0.025 or 2.5% to get the quantity of salt you'll need. So 900 grams times 0.025 gives me 22.5 grams of salt. Measure out the salt as best you can. My scales only go to the nearest 5 grams, so here it's flipping between 20 and 25 grams, which should be about 22.5 grams. I'm also going to add some flavourings in the form of fennel seeds. This is optional and entirely flexible in the quantity and the type of flavourings you add. Fresh turmeric, ginger, Szechuan pepper, star anise, caraway seeds are all good as well. Basically anything tasty is worth a try. Just bear in mind that a little does seem to go quite a long way. It's very easy to overdo it with spices. Massage all of this together for a while until it starts to soften and the liquid begins to come out of the vegetables. The softening happens because of both the mechanical force of massaging and the salt drawing out the liquid. Once you've had enough of massaging, let it sit there for half an hour or so. The salt will do the work for you and it will soften even more. You want it to be fairly soft so it packs into the fermenting vessel easily. The liquid that comes out of the veggies becomes the brine that covers them. So here we are, half an hour later. Give it a little squeeze to make sure it's nice and soft and there's plenty of brine. I reckon that's ready to pack into the fermenting vessel. There's plenty of options for fermenting vessels, but I've just gone for the cheap version of a plastic container with a couple of additions. What we're trying to achieve is an environment where as little oxygen comes into contact with the vegetables as possible. Push the vegetables down as hard as you can to expel any air from around them. Don't stress too much about sterilising your equipment, just make sure it's clean. While the vegetables ferment, they produce carbon dioxide which will fill the vessel. This needs to escape or the container will explode. As the container isn't airtight, air can also get in. So I've cut this piece of plastic to fit nicely over the vegetables to stop the air coming into contact with them. Push the plastic down on top of the vegetables and place a weight on top to keep it down. Here I've just used a smaller plastic container filled with water. Put the lid on, lifting the corner if necessary, and place it somewhere cool and dark for a week or two. For me, that's in the basement where the temperature is a few degrees cooler than the rest of the house. I've also found that winter's the best time to do it. Sometimes during the warmer months it'll ferment too fast, or other yeasts and moulds can take over. So now the sauerkraut's been fermenting for a few weeks, it's ready to eat. Transfer it into a smaller container and keep it in your fridge. The fermentation process is the magical part in this recipe. You leave it alone and the yeasts and bacteria present on the vegetables transform them into something delicious, usually. The salt acts to slow the growth of unwanted bacteria and moulds which will cause it to spoil, while allowing the bacteria we want, which is the Lactobacillus bacteria, to grow. The Lactobacillus don't mind the salt. When Lactobacillus grow and multiply, they produce lactic acid, which lowers the pH and further prevents other bacteria and moulds from growing and gives us the nice sour flavour. Lactobacillus are also quite happy growing in the absence of oxygen, unlike other bacteria and moulds. Hence the reason we try to eliminate air from the fermenting vessel. I've only had to bin one sauerkraut which smelt disgusting and had a thick red mould growing on top, but I've also had a couple of less than optimal kimchi which were a bit slimy. Otherwise they were pretty good, but the texture was a little bit off-putting. I'm not totally sure what the problem was, but I think the temperature had something to do with it. It doesn't always go the way you intend, but I'm unaware of any faulty sauerkraut making anyone ill. And because most of this process is largely in the hands of microscopic organisms, There's always an element of the unknown in what's happening and what the final product might turn out like. I'm far from an expert in this field, but I've enjoyed experimenting and finding out what works for me. There's lots of good reading out there that explains it better than I can. I'd recommend anything by Sandor Katz. Thanks and enjoy.